Hello there, welcome to part 2 of my Globalists in Parliament series. I thought it was absolutely fitting for the second Globalist in Parliament to be the newly crowned Home Secretary, James Cleverly. He replaced another globalist, Suella Braverman, in the British Parliament, and primarily because she had become just too toxic in order to be able to force through the bill that we are going to be discussing today. Now, Mr. Cleverly has been on my radar for a while, and it seemed evident that he was picked to go places, even though, like our first globalist, Penny Mordaunt, he is serially underwhelming as a person of state whose job is to represent us. So some background. He is James Spencer Cleverly. He's a British politician, Army Reserve officer. He's been Home Secretary since November 2023. He is a member of the Conservative Party and a Member of Parliament for Braintree in Essex since 2015. He previously served as the Foreign Secretary from 2022 to 2023, and now he's been replaced by alleged pig fancier David Cameron, who they brought back from the wilderness and made him into a lord in order to be able to serve into Parliament. Yes, this is your democracy, folks. Cleverly's other role included Secretary of State for Education, which he managed for a full 2 months in 2022. He was also co-chairman of the Conservative Party alongside Ben Elliott from 2019 to 2020. So none of his roles have lasted particularly long. He is a huge supporter of Ukraine, of course. In fact, he has visited President Zelensky in Kiev. In a video posted to Mr. Zelensky's Facebook page in June 2023, Mr. Cleverly is heard saying that the UK, and I quote, will continue backing you and your country until you are victorious. The Ukrainian president thanked the UK for the, quote, big support it has given his country. Everybody I've talked to does not agree with this. The British taxpayers have been committed to spending billions of pounds while our own people are struggling. And it's less impressive for us because, of course, we know this is America's proxy war. Now, I always find it very enlightening to look at a politician's voting record because that gives you a good idea of whom they may be obligated to or compromised by in some way, shape or form, and what really drives them. So let me have a look at Mr. Cleverly's voting record. Well, he almost always voted for a reduction in spending on welfare benefits. Of course he did. He generally voted against paying higher benefits over longer periods for those unable to work due to illness or disability. Again, of course. He voted against investigations into the Iraq war. He consistently voted for the use of UK military force in combat operations overseas. He generally voted against strengthening the military covenant. He has consistently voted for mass surveillance of people's communications and activities. He has consistently, there's quite a lot here that he has consistently voted for, and almost none of it is for the people. But this is exactly why he's our number 2 globalist in Parliament. So he has consistently voted for requiring the mass retention of information about communications. This is all about spying on you. He has consistently voted against higher taxes on banks. He has consistently voted against a publicly owned railway system. Again, politicians, they love privatisation, particularly Tories. And let me just be clear here. I don't believe there is a great deal of difference between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. What you have are nuances, little differences that make people out there think that their party is different, but they're not. They're really all in it together. Consistently voted for restricting the scope of legal aid. This is awful. This basically translates as, if you're poor, you're not going to get justice. He has voted for reforming the NHS so GPs buy services on behalf of their patients. Just horrendous, nightmare. And he has generally voted against laws to promote equality and human rights. That should give you a good overview of who James Cleverly is when we go into why I decided to make this video in the first place. He has shown overwhelming support and bias towards Israel, which is a hallmark of the globalists. He has poured scorn on the idea of it being an apartheid state. He said that is a slur. Excuse me. He said that at the Conservative Friends of Israel speech, which was during the Conservative conference. And cleverly, of course, is a Conservative friend of Israel, as is his Home Secretary predecessor, Suella Braverman. In fact, many of them are across parties. So again, this is not party political. They are all in it together. At that particular Conservative Friends of Israel, he was one of 6 cabinet ministers to speak. It attracted over 500 attendees. And once again, according to their promoters, proving itself to be one of the most popular fringe events at Tory party conference. Oh, and incidentally, our very first globalist, Penny Mordaunt, was also in attendance. It should be noted that both Suella Braverman, his predecessor, and James Cleverly have been paid by Israeli interests to go to Israel. I don't know about you, but I don't believe that our politicians should be attached to any groups of this nature. None whatsoever. They should be the Conservative Friends of the UK. That's it. End of story. I think we're all really tired about this globalist attitude of looking over the fence at everybody else's business while ignoring what is taking place in our own nation. He also, very interestingly, delivered a speech this year, the day after 9/11. He gave a speech in Israel about terrorism, once again showing his absolute bias towards the state. That was about 3 weeks before the October 7th Hamas attack. And he talked with the gathered audience of Israeli officials about our partnership with Israel. He referred to the importance of disrupting radicalization online. He referred to the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, as quieter, more discreet, sometimes invisible intelligence officers, police officers, diplomats, unseen, but nevertheless essential. The majority of this work relies on close cooperation, both bilaterally with the UK and in partnership with other world partnerships. I mean, this is such globalist language that you would have to be in a coma not to realise it by now. And I would refer you to part 1 of the video where I give a definition of globalism, which is based on a dictionary definition. So in that talk, it was terribly biased. He was clearly playing to the audience. We in the UK are under no illusion about Iran's malign behaviour. The right to self-defence belongs, of course, exclusively to Israel's security forces who operate within the lines of international law. Really? Are we sure about that? Of course we're not. He said he was going to make it clear to the Palestinian authorities that rather than spreading anti-Semitism, they should be clear there is no acceptance for brutality or targeting Israel's only way for peace to be sustainable. Now, this is absolutely true. This is exactly why people have been out there marching week after week for a ceasefire now. He says, I am not naive, incredibly challenging goals and exceptionally difficult. He's talking about the situation of peace in the Middle East. I have seen this country firsthand and read this country's history. And one of the things that has always amazed and impressed me about Israel is Israel's ability to seemingly do the impossible, to survive in the face of seemingly overwhelming odds. And it goes on, yada, 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 yada. It is an absolute press release in order to be able to appease and please his handlers. And let us not forget that Israel was absolutely one of the absolute worst countries, if not the worst, when it came to C-19 and forcing experimental jibs on people. And this, now I want to get to the point of why I have chosen him as our second globalist. It was because yesterday, Mr. Cleverly read the second reading of the Criminal Justice Bill 2024. Now, the Criminal Justice Bill there's been a lot of rumours online about it clamping down on our freedoms. And I've just spent 35 minutes of my life that I'll never get back listening to James Cleverly in Parliament. I wasn't actually there. I listened to a recording of it. going through the second reading of the criminal justice bill, and it is so scary. Now, just to be clear, this is the part of the process that takes it through Parliament before it receives royal assent. The aim is that this is a public hearing of the bill, and MPs are there to challenge and question it. Well, they would be if there were more there, because the point is these things are just a given. As I say, they are all in it together. That house should have been rammed to the rafters with other politicians questioning it, because me, as a journalist, not a politician, I've read through the bill, and I've listened to his reading of it, and it is scary. This is how you know that there are no representatives out there for you. So let's read through this. As I say, it's scary. He also yesterday tweeted, "We're giving the police more powers, from grooming gangs to violent crime. The police must have our support to make the UK safer." That's what the new criminal justice bill is all about. If only, right? If only. This is what they do, obviously. They give it their sort of top headlines of how they think they can get people on side. And most people do not look at the detail of what it entails. But that's why I'm here. So it's interesting, after he had said we want to give the police more powers, because he makes a Freudian slip while he is reading out the bill. And it goes as follows. And I quote him directly. He says, "It is my job to give those police forces every possible support in that endeavour, and the bill confers additional targeted powers on the police to enter premises without a warrant to steal or seize stolen goods." Now, I don't know about you, but I think Freudian slips are incredibly interesting. I feel that, for the most part, that they are what somebody is thinking, and the body, the mouth, cannot give away telling the truth. There's so much to this bill that I urge you to actually read it, because it's impossible for me to cover it all in this video. But I'm going to pick out some of the bits that I think are the most egregious. As one MP pointed out, the bill has a third dedicated to essentially penalising people for being homeless. Cleverly denies this, of course. As the MP pointed out, this is the Vagrancy Act on steroids. There are other things which are really deeply troubling. He wants to lower the age at which a community protection notice can be issued. Now, these are usually issued to people who are above the age of 16, but he now wants to lower it to the age of 10. And he wants to increase the upper limit for a fixed penalty notice for breaches, and take it from £100 to £500. Now, generally, the kind of people who are antisocial, and I'm not playing them down at all. I've lived around antisocial people, and it can be an absolute misery. But there are already sufficient police powers to deal with them, actually. And lo and behold, Sir Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan police chief, supports much of the nonsense. I mean, who is leaping up and down and saying, but what about the thousands of police who were laid off under David Cameron and Boris Johnson's watch? Boris Johnson laid off so many police in London when he was London mayor. It is obscene. And really what we actually need is more police on the streets, not more laws. And I should say, just as an aside, because it's a personal bugbear of mine, but Sir Mark Rowley also supports the Madeleine McCann abduction nonsense, and most recently, the nonsense regarding Christian B., the German prisoner. So this is not somebody that I rate in many respects, and many people have noted in recent weeks that Mr. Rowley is at the helm of 2 and even 3-tier policing going on. So what else that really has disturbed me? You know, the thing is, of the entire bill, there's really only 2 things that I know the public actually want. Because the criminalising of homeless people, the further criminalising of homeless people is obscene. Remember, we saw how toxic Braverman was talking about, destroying tents and criminalising people for having tents. Most people are not intentionally homeless. The biggest problem we have is lack of decent mental health facilities. And one of the MPs addressed this, but cleverly was like, oh yeah, I'll have my minister meet your minister and blah, blah, blah. And we know it'll be just shoved under the carpet. But that is a reality. Most people who are decently balanced and psychologically okay do not wish to be homeless, do not seek to be homeless, and are not forced into homelessness. So I find this a really draconian bill with Victorian qualities. These people are horrible. They'd be just literally running the workhouses. They're just awful. And of the entire bill. So now this is how they do it, right? They, as I say, they always push their top headlines onto people. So people go, oh yes, I want that. I want that as a better society. And of the bill, there's really only two things that I know the public want 100%. And that is to make people who have been convicted of serious crimes and given life sentences, to force them to attend the sentencing. Because it's really wrong when, you know, murderers and rapists can sit in their cell while their sentencing takes place. No, they should be forced to face the sentencing of their crimes. So I know many people agree with that. Further, there is part of the bill is to stop serious offenders from changing their names. Again, I think this is brilliant, but these are only two things out of an extremely long document that took him over half an hour to read through the bill. And this is how they do it. They wedge their heinous new laws in between the things that the public want, but they are also absolutely intent on clamping down our right to assemble and our right to protest. And we have seen that over the last few weeks when the agent provocateurs, and I include in that Suella Braverman, horrendous riot agitating individual. She had become too toxic for this bill. They knew, Rishi Sunak knew that he needed a clean face approach to reading the second reading of this bill. Suella Braverman had lost serious support in the House and in the public. So she had to be pushed aside, and hey, it's Cleverly's turn to enter stage right. You know, it is also interesting because, as I say, they've been wanting a riot. We've seen in Ireland, of course, they're now forcing through new hate legislation following Dublin riots. The new hate legislation has been on the cards for a while, but they need these trigger moments. Remember, problem, reaction, solution, Hegelian dialectic. That is what is taking place. Really important that people realise that. We're being played constantly. We're constantly being manipulated by these people. Stop allowing them to puppeteer you. I mean, and that's why I'm doing this, because I want to start to break down the minutiae of what these awful people are doing, these traitorous people are doing to us. And isn't it interesting that in light of their high support of Israel and their lack of support to Palestine, yesterday, on the day the second reading was read, who did James Cleverly meet? Why, he met the chief rabbi, Sir Ephraim Mervis. Now, the chief rabbi sort of oversees the British Jewish community, checks everything is working nicely, has tremendous power. This is a man that on the eve of the coronation, he stayed at their official residence, Clarence House, in order to be able to observe Shabbat. Now, where do you go with that? This tells you how much power this man has, and the fact that Cleverly meets with him. And let me read you what the chief rabbi tweeted. He said, I am very grateful for the unequivocal commitment to the security of the Jewish community Home Secretary at James Cleverly expressed to me on behalf of the government this afternoon. We discussed the concerning increases in anti-Semitism since October the 7th and the need to tackle any expressions of hatred on our streets, including the policing of marches. He left me in no doubt that all of this is an absolute priority of his. Straight out of their mouths, they're telling you. And what exactly constitutes expressions of hatred? Don't get me wrong. Again, I'm not justifying clear anti-Semitism or clear Islamophobia or clear racism. But The worry is these people, in terms of Cleverly and other politicians, they want to stop us raising the alarm against what they're doing. Our abusers want to abuse us and we remain silent about it. This is not okay. It's not okay at all. So let us be clear. This criminal justice bill is an absolute attack on our freedoms to protest. They want to break into our house without warrants. They want to have social housing providers evict people whose family members may be deemed antisocial. This is what they tried to do during the British riots. And I formed a group called PAIR, People Against Riot Evictions. We fought them on it, and their threats to penalise innocent families were withdrawn. They're raising it up again. These people just want to keep penalising people. They want to criminalise the homeless while making it illegal for us to protest about heinous acts in our country and around the world. This is so concerning. We need to be deeply, deeply concerned about this. And before I go, I just want to give you an insight into who James Cleverly is. And he made it clear at Prime Minister's Question Time when the Member of Parliament, Alex Cunningham, Member of Parliament for Stockton North, that's in the north of England. I'm going to read his quote, actually. He said, "I asked the Prime Minister why 34% of children in Stockton North are living in poverty. The Home Secretary can apparently be heard saying it is a hole." This is shocking. Cleverly has denied it, claiming that he actually was insulting the MP. But this is an insight into what James Cleverly, who represents the few rather than the many, really thinks about children living in poverty. He has been told it was unparliamentary language, and he said, "I did not and would not make such comments about his constituents." And everybody truly believes that he's lied in Parliament. Some people have been able to isolate it, and I actually heard him saying what Alex Cunningham and everybody else thinks Cleverly said. So that is an insight into who James Cleverly is. And by the way, poverty is certainly not an issue for this man. He hasn't paid council tax on his Essex home since 2015, despite his significant salary and all of the other financial benefits that come around being a member of Parliament. Records show that he has claimed back his council tax bill every year since he became an MP, right? We know what they're like. And also, by the way, he told porkies about the boats coming in with many men. Look, wherever you stand on this issue, this all plays into the hands of the globalists and the new criminal justice bill. They want us to riot. They can control us by clamping down on our freedom to assemble and to oppose the government. They have no plans on stopping the boats. If they wanted to, they could do it just like that, right? Look how they locked down the world in C-19. They can stop the boats, but they don't want to because it creates chaos and rioting and anguish amongst us down here, while they are up there on their lofty perches, treating us like the idiots they believe us to be. And by the way, the Home Secretary doesn't even know his own government's figures. He claimed in a tweet that illegal migration is down in the UK, but we cannot stop now. We will stop at nothing to break the business model of people smuggling gangs and stop the boats. According to the government's own records, and I quote, in the year ending June 2023, there were 52,530 irregular migrants detected entering the UK, up 17% from the year ending June 2022, and 85% of these arrived by small boats. These people will say whatever it takes to get the British public on their side, but let me assure you, they are far from it. I just want to thank all my Patreons for enabling the making of this video. If you would like to become a Patreon and support my work, there is a link in the description below. I want to thank you all for listening, liking, sharing and subscribing. Much appreciated. We will beat them yet.